Imagine surviving 6 years of the most brutal war in human history, only to discover your real suffering was about to begin. When Nazi Germany surrendered in May 1945, the streets of Europe erupted in celebration. The guns fell silent, the bombers stopped flying, and millions breathed again after a nightmare that seemed endless. But for the German soldiers who surrendered, the nightmare wasn't over. It was only changing shape. Millions of men, some veterans, some teenagers, suddenly found themselves prisoners of nations filled with grief, rage, hunger, and destruction. Their uniforms were stripped, their names replaced with numbers, and their futures swallowed by uncertainty. Today, we uncover a hidden chapter of history. What happened to German soldiers after the war? Their numbers, their hunger, their labor, their despair, and the millions who disappeared into camps stretching from the Rhine to the Siberian tundra. This is the story the world rarely discusses. A story of suffering after the surrender. Chapter 1: The Surrender and Mass Capture. As the Third Reich crumbled in early 1945, German units collapsed faster than anyone expected. Entire divisions surrendered without firing a shot. Columns of exhausted men walked with hands raised, carrying nothing but the clothes on their backs. By May 1945, over 11 million German soldiers were in Allied custody. Nearly 8 million captured by American, British, and Canadian forces. 3 to 4 million captured by the Soviet Union. Thousands more by France, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, Italy, Norway, and the Netherlands. The Allies were overwhelmed. They had planned for hundreds of thousands, not millions. Roads clogged with POEs. Rail stations overflowed. Entire fields became improvised holding pens. Some prisoners were veterans who had fought since Poland in 1939. Others were 17-year-old boys drafted in the final chaotic months. Many had not eaten for days. Some marched barefoot. Germany's collapse was total, and so was the collapse of its army. Among the most infamous were the American Rhine Meadow Camps, built quickly along the western bank of the Rhine River. These were not traditional POW camps. They were open fields surrounded by barbed wire and nothing more. No proper shelters, no barracks, no roofs. Prisoners slept directly in the mud. When it rained, rivers of filth formed through the camps. When the wind blew, men shivered under scraps of clothing. When the sun scorched the ground, there was no shade at all. Food was scarce everywhere in war-torn Europe. Water was often limited or contaminated. Medical care was minimal, and disease spread rapidly. Between 400,000 and 1 million men passed through the Rhine camps in a matter of months. Historians still debate how many died. Some say several thousand, others tens of thousands. One survivor wrote, "We had no tents, no blankets, only mud." Every night, more men died. For the soldiers who had survived the front lines, the Rhine became a new battlefield. One fought against hunger, cold, and hopelessness. If the Western camps were harsh, the Soviet camps were a descent into hell. German prisoners were marched east, sometimes hundreds of kilometers, toward camps scattered across the vast Soviet Union, Siberia, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, the Urals, the Arctic forests. Temperatures could drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius. Rations shrank to 600 to 800 calories a day. Men worked in coal mines, forests, railways, and factories, sometimes 12 to 14 hours per shift. Many collapsed from exhaustion, many more from dysentery, typhus, and untreated wounds. An estimated 1 million German soldiers perished in Soviet captivity. Yet even in the bleakest conditions, moments of humanity appeared. A former prisoner remembered, "A Russian woman gave me half her potato. That small slice of food may have saved my life." These rare gestures did not erase the suffering, but they showed that even in the ruins of war, compassion survived. France had been devastated by 5 years of occupation. German labor was used to rebuild cities, roads, railways, and farms. About 740,000 German POWs were transferred from American custody to France. Many arrived malnourished and sick. Thousands died from exhaustion, disease, or accidents in forced labor projects. British camps were comparatively better organized. Food was limited but more consistent. German Poles worked on farms and factories or clearing debris from bombed cities. Some even developed friendships with local families' relationships that lasted decades after the war. Other allies, Canada, the United States, and the UK, transported German Poles overseas. For many, it was a strange twist of fate. After fighting across Europe, they found themselves herding sheep in Canada or harvesting crops in Oklahoma. Not all suffering was equal, but captivity in all its forms reshaped millions of lives. Daily life depended on location, weather, and camp leadership, but certain hardships echoed everywhere. 1. Hunger. Food was the greatest enemy. Calorie levels often dropped below survival minimums. Prisoners fought over potato peels. Bread was so hard it had to be soaked in water to be eaten. 2. Disease-crowded conditions and poor sanitation led to outbreaks of dysentery, typhus, tuberculosis, pneumonia. Medical supplies were scarce. 3. Psychological collapse. Many soldiers felt abandoned. They no longer had a country, a flag, or news from home. One POW wrote, "The war ended. But for us, the world ended too." 4. Forced labor. Millions of prisoners rebuilt Europe. Roads, bridges, railways, factories, farmland. For many, labor was the only thing keeping them warm enough to stay alive. At first, many prisoners believed they'd be released within weeks. But the weeks turned into months, and for some years. Western releases began late in 1946. Most Western-held prisoners returned home by 1948, but Soviet-held prisoners, some did not return until 1955, 10 years after the war. Those who finally returned stepped into a Germany shattered beyond recognition. Cities in ruins, families dispersed, homes destroyed. Some discovered that their wives had remarried. Others returned to empty houses and silent streets. Many carried lifelong scars, physical, emotional, and psychological. Karl, age 19, captured on the Western Front, survived the Rhine Meadow Camps, returned home weighing 38 kilograms. He later said he survived only because other prisoners shared what little food they had. Hans, age 32, sent to a Siberian labor camp, worked 12 hours a day in a coal mine, returned in 1949 to find half his hometown reduced to ashes. Dieter, age 17, one of the youngest in his unit, sent to France, forced to rebuild bridges and roads, developed a bond with a French farmer who treated him kindly. Years later, he returned to lay flowers on the man's grave. These stories remind us, not every German soldier was a believer in Nazism. Many were ordinary men crushed by forces far beyond their control. The suffering of German soldiers after World War II does not excuse the crimes of the Nazi regime. It does not erase what happened across Europe. But it is a human story, one of fear, hunger, labor, and survival. A reminder that once the guns fall silent, the pain does not end. For millions of German Poles, the war did not end in May 1945. It ended years later when they finally returned home, thin, changed, and carrying memories they would never forget. History is not just battles and victories. It is the silent suffering of those left behind.